I don't know if I believe in monsters. I used to think I didn't. I used to think the scariest thing in the woods was a bear or a really desperate person. Now I'm not so sure. Not after what happened to me on Max Patch. It was mid-September, the start of fall, when the nights still hold on to a little bit of summer warmth, but the air smells like change. I was hiking solo along the Appalachian Trail, working my way through North Carolina with no real deadline. I'd quit my job that summer and told myself I'd finish at least one big trail before I turned 30. The kind of romantic, beat-up, soul-searching stuff you read in trail journals. That's what I thought I was doing, anyway. Max Patch was one of those must-stop spots people kept mentioning. A grassy bald with 360-degree views of the Blue Ridge Mountains. Photos of it looked unreal. Green hills rolling into distant blue layers like waves frozen mid-crash. I had to see it for myself. I got there around 4 p.m. The sun was starting its descent and the light was golden, spilling through the trees and lighting the path like a welcome sign. I passed a few couples with dogs, a group of college kids taking selfies, and one older man with a beard that reached the middle of his chest. He nodded as he passed, silent. Other than that, it felt like the mountain was emptying out. Most people do Max Patch as a day hike. I planned to camp just off-trail in a tucked-away grove a half-mile from the Bald. When I reached the grove, it was still and quiet. Perfectly still. That should have tipped me off. Even the breeze had disappeared. I didn't hear birds or bugs or anything. Just my own footsteps crunching into pine needles and leaves. I shrugged it off. I was used to hiking alone. Quiet didn't bother me. I set up camp, cooked dinner, and watched the sky bleed into pinks and purples above the ridge. I remember thinking it was one of the most peaceful nights I'd had on trail. It felt almost sacred. It wasn't until I was lying in my tent that things changed. I couldn't sleep. That wasn't unusual. I often had trouble the first night in a new spot. I read a few chapters of some mystery novel I'd brought, then laid there, eyes closed, listening to the emptiness. Around 1 a.m., I heard a sound. Thud. It wasn't loud, but it was close, directly underneath me, like something heavy had landed on the forest floor below my tent. I blinked, confused, thought maybe it was a branch falling. Then I felt it. The ground beneath me shifted, just slightly. A ripple, like something moved, not beside me, beneath me. I sat up. My head was pounding with sudden adrenaline. I held my breath and pressed my hand to the tent floor. Stillness. And then... Not mine. Slow. Deep. Wet. It came from the dirt under me. I pressed my ear to the floor. Another breath, a low, rasping inhale, like lungs full of mud trying to pull in air. I don't know how long I lay like that, frozen. My body screamed to move, but my brain wouldn't let me. I think it was trying to protect me, like maybe if I stayed still, I'd stay unnoticed. Eventually, I snapped out of it. I unzipped the tent and stumbled out, yanking on my boots without tying them, headlamp already in hand. I didn't look down at the ground right away. I couldn't. When I finally turned back, I saw it. The patch of dirt where my tent had been was rising. Just barely, but enough. A slow, almost imperceptible heaving, like the land was breathing, or like something was crawling up from below. I grabbed everything I could, stuffing it into my pack without care. Sleeping pad half rolled, I didn't care. I was out of there. I hiked in the dark, headlamp bouncing shadows off every tree. I didn't stop until I was back on the bald, wide open with stars above me. I threw my sleeping bag down right there in the grass and laid staring at the sky, afraid to close my eyes. I never went back for my tent. In the daylight, Mac's patch looked beautiful again, safe even. But the grove was still too quiet. I didn't go back, didn't want to. Back in Hot Springs, I told a guy at the outfitter what happened. He didn't laugh. He just nodded and said, "Sometimes the mountain breathes weird." Then he looked at me a little too long and said, "You didn't follow it, did you?"
I said no. He nodded again, slowly. "Good. Just leave it be." I didn't sleep right for weeks. I still don't camp on bald patches, and I never, ever sleep directly on the ground without checking what's under it. Because now I know. Some places on the trail aren't meant for us. Some places hide things too old to name. And if you listen close enough, you might just hear them breathing back.
They say the Appalachian Trail changes people, that it strips you down, takes away the noise, the screens, the rituals, and replaces it with something raw, something real. But what no one tells you is that the trail also has rules, unspoken ones, ancient ones, and sometimes if you're unlucky, you break one without knowing, like I did. I was 17 days into a solo hike on the southern stretch of the Appalachian Trail somewhere outside Hiawassee, Georgia. It was late spring, wildflowers were blooming, the sun was bright but not cruel. My knees ached, but my pack was lighter. I'd fallen into the rhythm of trail life, early mornings, long walks, eating when you're hungry, sleeping when it's dark. That day had been long, too long. I'd miscalculated my water resupply. The last stream had been dry. My last bar was eaten before noon. I'd hiked 20 miles with nothing but air in my gut and salt on my face. I was past hunger, walking on fumes, fingers shaking. And that's when I saw it, just off the trail, tucked into a clearing like it had grown there naturally. A plastic folding table, white, sun-bleached, the legs buried an inch in pine needles. On top of it, snacks, dozens of them, granola bars, peanut butter packets, a neat row of bottled waters, each one beaded with condensation, even a couple of cold beers. I froze. This was trail magic. The term is well known on the AT. It refers to gifts left for hikers by kind strangers. Trail angels. Sometimes it's a cooler full of soda. Sometimes it's hot food cooked by volunteers. It's one of the purest things about the trail. Random acts of kindness with no strings attached. But this, no sign, no chairs, no other hikers. Just a table deep in the woods with fresh snacks, cold drinks, and not a single footprint around it. I should have walked away. Every hair on my neck told me to, but I didn't. I told myself it was fine, that someone had just dropped it off. that maybe the cooler was hidden nearby. I took a granola bar, peanut butter, chocolate chip, and cracked open one of the beers. Sat down on a flat rock near the table. The bar was perfect, soft, chewy, sweet. The beer was ice cold. My hand left condensation on the can. I remember thinking, it's almost too perfect. Still, I finished both in minutes. When I stood, I called out, "Thanks, trail angels," like we all do, even when no one's there. I paused a moment longer, then stepped back onto the trail. The moment my boots hit the dirt, I felt it, a change, not in temperature, not in light, in attention. It was like the woods had turned slightly toward me, like something had noticed me that hadn't before. I shook it off, just blood sugar stabilizing, just nerves. I'd eaten too fast. I kept walking. It started as a feeling, that prickly sensation you get when someone's watching, but every time I turned, the forest was empty. Then I started hearing them. The footsteps, not constant, just mirroring. Step, step, stop. When I stopped, silence. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was an animal, deer maybe, or a bobcat. I clacked my trekking poles together, shouted, "Hey," into the trees. Nothing moved. I kept hiking, faster now. The steps kept up, always behind me, always just far enough away that I could almost pretend they weren't there. It was nearly sunset when I found the second one. Same table, same model, same off-white plastic, but this time the setup was different. New snacks, small pile of trail mix packets, 3 glass bottles of root beer, a pair of wool socks neatly folded, and a note, scrawled in red pen on torn notebook paper. "Glad you liked it. Want more?" I froze. My stomach turned. The handwriting was jagged, rushed, not friendly. And then I noticed there were no footprints in the dirt. None. Not mine. Not anyone's. The pine needles around the table looked untouched. "Virgin." I stepped back slowly, eyes scanning the trees. Nothing. I didn't reply. Didn't touch a single thing. I turned and walked, then walked faster, then ran. The footsteps behind me weren't subtle anymore. They ran when I ran. They stopped when I stopped. Once I darted behind a tree, then whipped around to catch whatever it was. There was nothing. Just the sound of my own heart hammering in my ears. And yet, I wasn't alone. I could feel it. Whatever had followed me from that first table was closer now. Watching. Waiting. Not an animal. Not a person. Something else. I didn't make camp that night. I hiked straight through dusk, through twilight, into full dark. I had my headlamp, but the batteries were nearly dead. The beam faded to a sickly yellow cone that barely lit 5 feet ahead. At some point, I tripped and fell hard. Palms scraped, knee bruised. I sat there in the dark, breathing like a trapped animal. That's when I heard the whisper, not words. Just breathe, right next to my ear. I turned, nothing. But the table was there again. I swear it hadn't been there a second before. I would have seen it. I would have smelled it. But now it stood 10 feet off the trail. No light, no fireflies, just moonlight. Same table, but different now. No snacks, only one item, a plate. On it, a granola bar, half eaten, and beside it, an open beer can. The same kind I drank earlier. Same bite marks. Same fingerprints on the label. Mine. Another note lay beneath the plate, written in the same red pen. "We shared a meal. You're part of us now." That was it. I turned and ran, full speed, blind, branches slapping my face, roots grabbing at my boots. I didn't care. I just ran. I don't know how long I ran. Time didn't work right anymore, but at some point I heard cars, headlights, a highway. I broke through the tree line like a wild animal, flailing, gasping. A pickup truck screeched to a halt as I stumbled onto the road. The driver, an older guy in a Braves hat, jumped out and ran toward me. "You okay?" he shouted. I collapsed to my knees, pointing behind me. There's something back there. In the woods. It followed me. He helped me into the truck. Didn't ask more. Didn't have to. I haven't told anyone the full story. Not the ranger who found me. Not my friends back home. Not even the therapist I half-heartedly saw twice before deciding some things are better left undiagnosed. But one thing has haunted me since that day. Not the footsteps. Not the whispers. The silence. True silence, like the woods made a space for me and then closed it. I never heard the thing leave, and yet it's not with me now. Not in my house, not in my dreams. It let me go. but I think I left something behind. Last week I got a package in the mail. No return address, no note. Just a small square cardboard box wrapped in butcher's twine. Inside was a plastic fork, sun-bleached, dirty, familiar. Beneath it a folded slip of paper, 4 words written in the same red ink I saw in the forest. You forgot your seat. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. But I haven't eaten since, not a single bite. Not until I know what the 4th table looks like.
If you've ever hiked through the Great Smoky Mountains in winter, you know the difference between quiet and silence. Quiet is bird song, wind in the branches, the crunch of your boots on the trail. Silence is when the forest feels like it's listening. Back in early 2021, I was chasing that silence. I'd taken off from work for a solo hike, 5 days along the Appalachian Trail near Fontana Dam. I'd done the Smokies before, but never alone, never in winter, and definitely not prepared for what I'd find. The first couple of days were exactly what I had hoped for. Empty trails, snow-kissed trees, and solitude so deep it felt like a kind of rebirth. Each night I'd set up camp early, built a small fire, and watched the light fade through a cathedral of naked branches. It was cold, but not unbearable. My gear was solid, my pace was steady. On the second afternoon, somewhere between Eagle Creek and Shuckstack, I stumbled on a clearing, slightly sunken, with an old fire pit in the center. You could tell it had once been well used, maybe by groups or ridge runners. The stones were blackened, lichen creeping over the tops, but there hadn't been a flame here in a long time. No fresh ash, just a dead circle in the forest. I dropped my pack and decided to make camp there. The ground was flat, the sky looked clear, and I figured I could gather wood before dark. That's when I saw it. I was kicking through the leaves at the edge of the clearing, looking for dry sticks, when something caught my eye. White, smooth, angular. At first, I thought it was just an old piece of wood, bleached by sun and snow, but when I brushed the leaves away, my stomach dropped. It was a bone. Not a big one, maybe the length of a hand, clean. Too clean. No chew marks, no rot. It looked placed. I knelt down, swept away more leaves, and found the rest of the pile. 5 or 6 bones, arranged in a rough curve, deliberate, like someone had taken the time to set them just so. A small jawbone, a thin, narrow femur, vertebrae, delicate as a bird's. Not human, I told myself. Probably deer, maybe a coyote. But I'd seen deer bones before. I grew up in the mountains. These were different. And right next to them, half buried in the dirt, was a ring. Gold, thin, delicate. I wiped it clean with my sleeve. There were initials etched on the inside, small and old-fashioned. MJ plus RT. I don't know why I pocketed it. Maybe because it felt wrong to leave it there. Maybe because it was beautiful. Maybe because I wanted answers. But whatever the reason, it was a mistake. That night, things changed. The temperature dropped hard after sunset. I tried building a fire with the driest wood I could find, but it refused to catch. I'd get the flame going, coax it to life, and then it would snuff out, as if someone leaned over my shoulder and blew gently on it. I tried again, same thing. By the 5th time, I was sweating in the cold, shaking with frustration. I stared at the fire pit, suddenly unsure if the stones were even the same ones from earlier.
Something felt off, like they'd shifted subtly, reshaped themselves while I wasn't looking. The wind was still, but I could feel movement around me. Not footsteps, not rustling, whispers. So faint I thought they were in my own mind. Half-heard syllables threading through the dark. I didn't mean to. She wouldn't listen. I told her not to go. They circled the camp, soft, breathy, never closer, never louder, just enough to keep my skin crawling and my spine rigid. I didn't sleep. By the time the sky began to lighten, I was half delirious with exhaustion. The whispers had stopped sometime around 3 a.m., but the unease remained, heavy, damp, and impossible to shake. I stood, stretched, and turned to pack up camp, and froze. My gear, everything, was soaked. Tent, sleeping bag, backpack, even the inside of my boots. Not a drizzle, not dew, soaked, as if someone had dragged it all through a stream and set it back exactly as it had been. But it hadn't rained. The night had been clear. My water bottles were still full, and the fire pit was gone. Not scattered, not buried, just gone. No stones, no ring of blackened earth, only smooth, undisturbed forest floor, like it had never been there at all. I reached into my jacket pocket, half hoping I imagined the ring, but it was still there, cold. I didn't eat that morning. I didn't stop to check my map or write in my trail journal. I packed what I could, wrung out the rest, and headed down the trail at a pace just short of a run. The snow flurries began mid-morning, soft and silent, but the trail felt unfamiliar, though I'd walked it just the day before. Trees leaned slightly inward. Blazes faded from view too soon. And every now and then, I'd hear the soft crunch of footsteps behind me, exactly matching mine. Whenever I stopped to listen, they stopped too. I turned once, angry and scared, and yelled into the woods. Nothing answered. But the whispering began again. He's still here. They never found her. She wore the ring. I didn't remember pulling the ring out, but when I looked down, it was in my hand. Fingers clenched so tight it had left an impression in my skin. I flung it as hard as I could into the woods. It vanished into the trees. The whispers stopped. I made it to Fontana village by sundown. A park ranger saw me stumbling down the hill, pale and shaking, and offered to take me to the visitor center. I declined. I just wanted to leave. I told him I'd lost the trail for a bit, that the weather got to me. He nodded, said it happens more than you think. Before I turned to go, I asked, casually, if anyone had ever reported weird stuff out there. Bones, rings, voices. His face didn't change, but he paused before answering. There's a story hikers pass around sometimes about a couple that went missing up near Shuckstack in the 70s. Just vanished. No signs. No gear. Nothing. People say she was wearing a gold ring, engraved. He didn't press when I didn't reply. Just said, "Take care out there," and walked away. Back home, I didn't throw anything away. I didn't burn my journal or ditch my gear or pretend it never happened. Instead, I did something worse. I started researching. The initials on the ring, MJ plus RT, turned out to be more common than you'd think. Dozens of possibilities, but only one stood out. A small newspaper clipping from 1974, buried in a digital archive. A missing couple, Margaret Jensen and Robert Trammell, last seen hiking near Shuckstack. No bodies ever found. Their photo was grainy, smiling, young. She wore the ring. I kept reading, looking for resolution, or maybe just punishment. I thought if I learned the truth, I could return the ring, end it. But the more I dug, the more strange things began to happen. My hiking boots, bone dry since returning, started leaving wet footprints on my floor. The trees in old trail photos began to shift positions when I looked again. And the bones? They showed up in a dream, arranged just as I'd found them. But this time, my femur was among them. That's when the phone calls started. Always at 3:13 a.m. Always silent until last night. A woman's voice, brittle, barely above a whisper, spoke just one word. Return. I booked a flight. This morning, I'm writing from a hotel just outside Fontana village. I didn't bring my gear, didn't tell anyone where I was going. The ring is in my pocket. Heavy now. Too heavy for something so small. I'm not going back to bury it. I'm going to ask her what she wants. And this time, if she whispers, I'll listen. Even if it's the last thing I do.